Welcome back, and we are here with John Bissell, founder and CEO of Micro Midas, right here in West Sacramento. How you doing today, John?
Doing well.
Good. Thanks for coming down. And can you just tell us a little bit about what Micro Midas is?
Sure. So we're a small chemical company, and what we do is we develop new technology for the chemical industry. And when I say new technology, what that means is usually you're either using a material to do something that has never been used before, or you're making a new material. In our case, we do a little bit of both.
And what are you guys making?
So we're making polyester. So we can either make, and that's the same polyester that you use for your shirts, or often the most visible form of it is in water bottles or Coke bottles, something like that. And so we make both the exact same polyester that's used, or PET, that's used right now, but we make it from different materials, so from lignocellulosic wastes, things like that, agricultural waste, wood waste, that sort of thing. And then we also make a new kind of polyester that can be used in a lot of those same applications and looks the same. You wouldn't know the difference if you were playing with it, but it has a little bit better properties.
Now, Clinton was asking, we were talking earlier about the polyester. And do you use this polyester in yoga pants? He's a big fan.
Yeah.
Can you use polyester in yoga pants?
I'm sure there's a certain amount of it that gets used in yoga pants.
All right. So, Clint, yeah, I think we're okay there. So now you have a factory. We walked through it yesterday, and we've talked over time about what you've got going down there, and it's really it's a laboratory, and you're discovering a more affordable way to actually make the polyester.
Right.
Tell us about that process.
Sure. So as you say, we have a laboratory and we have a pilot plant, and what we're essentially doing is we're trying to figure out what can we do at very, very large scale. So we're always planning for the large scale. What we're doing right now in our pilot plant is not large enough to affect anything in the world, unless ultimately that technology gets converted into these gigantic plants that you see around the world every once in a while when you drive by a refinery or something like that. And so we're spending all of our time trying to figure out how can we optimize this chemical process that we've already developed to make this polyester and this new polyester.
So this is a pilot program. Tell us how you got started.
So I started out as a chemical engineer at East Davis, and we were working with a couple different professors at the time. My co-founder, Ryan Smith, is also a chemical engineer. So we were working with them, and we thought, man, these are really interesting projects that we think really could have an impact on the world. And so when we left UC Davis, we went out and we worked at our own places for a little while. He was at NEC. I was working for a company called Ampac. And a couple years later, we said, we've got to do something with this project. It's too interesting. It sounds like too much fun. We have to go do that. And that's how we spun those technologies out of UC Davis and then built a company around them.
How did you decide on the name Micro Midas?
Yeah. So that was a little bit of
his decision?
Yeah.
Come on, Ryan.
No. So it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek name. I mean, to be honest, we were sort of 23, 24-year-olds who weren't really taking the whole thing all that seriously at the time. So there were aspects of it that we thought would be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and then it stuck. So It turns out that once you've got all your marketing stuff and you're passing it out to people and people are calling you back and saying, hey, you're Micro Midas. But really the idea was that we started out with a microbial process. We're doing what we would call now a fully chemical process, but originally with selected microbes. And the idea was that these little microbes were taking low-value feedstocks, low-value stuff to turn into plastics. And so they were like little King Midases swimming around. Hence Micro Midas. Yeah.
Wow. Now, originally getting started, you went out and pitched this concept to some investors. Tell us how you originally got started in terms of raising money to pay for this. Because we'll end up hearing more about your plant, but I mean, because they are your laboratory, which is significant in size, and so. But I wanted to share with the folks how you got started and how you raised the money.
Yeah, sure. So we started out, and we didn't pitch a couple investors. We pitched probably in excess of at least 60, maybe more like 100, a little over 100. It's hard to. So it's sort of a scoring process.
Okay, now 100 different pitches, or is that different people that were there when you were pitching?
No, 100 different pitches.
Oh my gosh.
So a technology like ours is sufficiently specific that people really need to have prior experience with it, and at least to a certain extent to be comfortable with the idea of investing. Often, something about it they have to understand and feel familiar with. And so there's you really are sort of searching for a person who is interested in a growth business like this and also has enough experience with the technology or something like the technology that they feel comfortable with the investment. And so I just built a network in Silicon Valley, and most of it was in the Bay Area, but not entirely. And we got lucky. Somebody actually found us. At I think they, it's one of my talks somewhere. They heard it, and they called me. Actually, they emailed me with very little punctuation and no capital letters and no signature in the email.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking, man, is this worth taking the time to take this meeting? Well, it's in between two others in the Bay, so I might as well take it. I'll just walk up there. And this guy, Alex Millar, ended up being a fantastic investor. I really can't speak highly enough of him. And it was entirely because he happened to shoot me a one-line email, and I happened to take the meeting.
But he's not good at punctuation. He's not good at the emailing. It doesn't sound. That's not his strength. He's got money.
He's all substance. He's all substance.
I love it. Now, I know you were at a pinch competition with Warren Smith, the CEO of the Sac Republic, right? What happened to that pitch competition?
I think it was called the Golden State something or other. I honestly don't even remember. So I was not there for that pitch. One of my other co-founders was.
Okay. Because I heard you guys got first place and he came in a second.
There's a friendly rival.
Warren's a great guy, and he's been on the show, in fact. But okay, so you raised about $80,000 of startup at the beginning. And when was your first big break? Because that's not even $80,000 is not even enough to go buy a chemistry set, right? So you really need more than that to get it going.
Yeah, unfortunately, the chemical industry tends to be a very capital-heavy industry. So you need a lot of money to do stuff. But then the upside of that is that at the end, if you're successful, you can deploy enormous amounts of capital profitably, which is not the case in all industries. So we got a break of it was that investor that I was just referring to who kind of came out of the woodwork. He led a few $1 million investment, and that was when we felt like, okay, maybe we can get this done. Maybe this can happen.
So how do you protect your technology?
So there are a variety of ways that you do that. Mostly we do it by just not telling people the most important parts of it.
Okay.
But there are also patents, which are, that's an important part of the strategy. But the intellectual property strategy is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about and working through. There are lots of moving parts there.
So you guys are going to disrupt the polyester industry, right? Because you're talking about making Coke bottles for substantially cheaper than what Coke pays for them today. Is that right?
Right. Well, so it's a really interesting industry. So if you look at the price, it tends to be correlated to the price of oil. The price of oil right now is incredibly low, right? It's something like $30 a barrel. At the current price point, we're about dead even with the price. So the idea that we would be substantially cheaper than $30 a barrel, man, that would be great.
Because they're making Coke bottles today or polyester out of from the petroleum industry.
Right. They make it from oil.
From oil.
And that's the whole current industry. And so, but they're very concerned about volatility or quick changes in price of their raw material, right? Because this is a significant thing. So it's sort of like if, one month your mortgage was, was $500, and the next month it was $3,000. Right, and you didn't know ahead of time how expensive it was going to be from month to month, and it might stay at $3,000, might pop back down to $500. Right, that's literally the range that you see in differing price for polyester right now. So one of the things that's most attractive about us is that we can produce polyester at a very consistent price. So no matter what the oil price does, our polyester can be the same price all the way through, and so that kind of certainty is combined with a relatively low price. That kind of certainty is what the brands who use it find so valuable.
You think about oil has come down so much, and it's affecting the economy. It's affecting so many businesses. Now, some people would say that's good. Some people would say that's bad. Obviously, in your case, it's not the most helpful thing. But you're actually going to reduce the for oil. That's going to cause oil to go down more. I'm not an economics guy, as you can tell, but I'm just thinking supply and demand. You're not going to help the price of oil.
So you're dead on. But the chemicals and materials industry, while it is large, it's probably the third largest industry in the world, depending on how you measure. It's actually just the tail of the oil dog, so to speak. So even if all of the materials were no longer made from oil, it probably wouldn't have a dramatic impact on the price of oil because mostly what oil is used for is fuel. So you use vastly more oil in your car gas tank or truck gas tanks or ships than the world uses to make stuff out of it.
Okay. So I'm going to throw out three numbers at you: 7, 50, and 0. Right? You've been 7 years in business. You've got 50 employees and 0 revenue. Okay. Which of those numbers matters most?
The third one matters most, believe
The
me.
revenue. It's always about the money.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Well, I'm Mark Haney. We're talking to John Bissell. He is the founder of Micromidas. They're doing big things here in the Sacramento area. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the upside to this big bet that you're placing right now. Again, I'm Mark Haney. You're listening to Entrepreneurs Unlimited on KHTK Sports 1140 and HaneyBiz.com. Welcome back, and we are back with John Bissell, founder and CEO of Micromidas, and they are changing the way polyester is manufactured, and they're creating this science right here in West Sacramento. Now, Micromidas is currently a $40 million bet, right? You've got $40 million worth of investment, and you yourself, you describe this as kind of a swinging for the fences kind of technology. How risky of a bet is it?
So we would say usually that risk should be allocated to the people that are can most appropriately handle it, right? And so how risky it is depends entirely upon your view of the world. In our view, we think that it's very easily developed. Well, I shouldn't say easily. It's a technology which can be developed, and it's one that has a substantially high payout on the other side of it, right? So we see it very much as something that is certainly there's risk in anything, but we see most of the risk is a capital raising risk. So therefore, if you're bringing the money and you're writing the check, then for the most part, you're probably going to succeed.
So it's a race to develop something before you run out of money or get your next round of funding. And I know that the upside is enormous in terms of building factories and whatnot all over the country. Tell us about the upside for this $40 million. I mean, how does that play out? How big could this be?
So if you're going to look at comparable companies, right? So if you go back and you say, well, Dow Chemical back in the day had a process to make bromine, right? Which is something that we don't use really in our daily life, but along the way they developed lots and lots of other technologies.
What is it again? Did they develop?
Originally, they started out with bromine.
Bromine.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a bit of an obscure chemical. It was used in particular for medical treatments then.
Oh, gotcha.
But so now Dow Chemical is a $60 billion company. Took them 80 to 100 years, right, to do it.
Right.
But they were a multi-billion-dollar company in real terms quite quickly. And so the upside for the investors or the money that's already into the company is really that large chemical companies tend to be extraordinarily valuable. So once you can stake out your space, you have enormous, barriers to entry or moats into your business. People have a lot of difficulty breaking into a chemical business. And so that's where the value is that the chemical companies are typically quite valuable if successful.
And, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about the technology. It's a clean technology, right? So tell us how you make these products and why is it good for the environment?
Sure. So in the case of chemicals and materials, most of the time, not entirely, but most of the time, the use of materials or the resources that go into making it is actually in the stuff. So it's not in what you did to the stuff. So in the sense of moving things around or processing, that's usually not where most of the waste goes, right? Use of materials is the way resources is the way we like to think about it. So the key is if you can use something else to make it, that's where you get most of your environmental benefit.
Okay, so you're taking garbage or one man's garbage is what we're making the polyester out of then, in your case.
Right.
Versus taking the petroleum out of the ground.
Precisely.
Okay. And you're using palm oil or palm products?
We can use, not palm oil, but a byproduct from palm. So there's, and there are a whole bunch of things that I could talk about. But the two that are probably most material are pine. So it turns out that the U.S. is sort of like the Saudi Arabia of pine. We have an enormous reservoir of timber that we can use, and we're accumulating it much more quickly than we can use it. So we've looked at pine as a
These are
feedstock.
just the scraps from a pine tree, or
We can use either whole pine trees,
Okay.
right? Which, or you can use the residue from the pulp and paper mills.
okay.
And then that's one. And then the other major feedstock that we've looked at is, as you said, palm. So palm, they crush the fruit, they make the oil, they extract the oil, and then they're left with this. About half of the mass is this woody, fibrous material that's sort of like an overgrown grape bunch. The woody twigs in the grape bunch, and that we can use that as a feedstock as well.
So Marcus and I walked through your offices, your lab yesterday, and we're getting the tour, and a lot of high-tech machinery and things like that are going into these processes. And this is just the lab. From here, from this $40 million lab, you have the ability to then take this technology and expand it 100-fold? I mean, a lot bigger. That means factories. What would those factories look like?
So in California, it's often a little bit difficult to point to a factory that people are used to. But for Sacramento, the one that I usually use as an example is as you're driving out of the Bay Area on 80, right around Rodeo, there's a big oil refinery off to your right that people usually that you sort of go over the hill and there's this big refinery. It'll look like that, right? It just happens to use different materials and make something else.
Aha.
But that's sort of that's the visual.
And where do you intend to locate those factories?
So typically those factories in the chemical industry, you're worried about feedstock logistics and product logistics. So because we don't have large amounts of pine that we cut for pulp mills in California, we would probably be located down in the southeast for the most part.
Are there certain states that are most creative about recruiting businesses?
There are some states
They want
that
you to
are-
locate there. They want to pay you money to bring the jobs and so on, right?
Yeah. Texas can be pretty aggressive.
Okay.
Louisiana is a classic sort of chemical state, but all along the Gulf Coast tends to be where these plants are located.
Yeah, well, we started a much smaller operation in Texas, and yeah, they gave us subsidies to locate. And is it more at the state level, or is it federal, or even local?
Often state is sort
Okay.
of the one where you get the most diversity.
And at this point, you're in the process of raising more money so that you can take this technology and then go grow it. Tell us about what's happening right now in terms of raising money.
So unfortunately, it occurred to me this morning that we're going to have this conversation. But unfortunately, I can't, as a private company, say that we're actually raising money.
Oh, you
so that's a
can't.
mystery. Yeah.
Oh, well, then I lied again.
One would presume that we're raising
One
money.
might presume that. And I'm wondering what the growth of this type of company. Let's assume there might be money to be raised, especially since you have no revenue yet. That money is going to need to be raised to build factories, and it's probably going to exceed the 5-star bank lending limits. One of our sponsors, right? So you're not going to go over to 5-star and borrow money for the factory. So I guess my question is, as you grow this operation big, what's that mean to Sacramento, right? Because these factories are going to be all over the country. And what does that mean for jobs in Sacramento? You've got 50 great jobs right now in Sacramento. We're not talking minimum wage call center jobs. These are real jobs. What's that mean long term?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So as you say, there's the manufacturing hubs, right? So as we build plants, then those will generate jobs and wealth in that particular area. But much of that also flows back to the headquarters of the company. And the odds are that the headquarters of the company will probably stay in Sacramento or certainly Northern California. And so as the company grows and we have the need to support those plants and continue to develop technology, all those sorts of things, we expect that probably a lot of it's going to continue to happen here. So you could imagine if you, again, going back to comparable chemical companies, but downstream, right, once they've grown up, so to speak, you're looking at thousands, in some cases tens of thousands of jobs that typically are associated with a large operating chemical company.
How old are you?
I am 30.
Have you ever been underestimated?
I've been underestimated. I like to say sometimes I've been overestimated.
I mean, come on, 30 years old, and look at the technology that you're creating, you're developing things. I mean, there must be a time when people are underestimating you.
Yeah, well, I think that when I was a 23 or 24-year-old going and raising money for a large, complex chemical business, I think that there may have been some skepticism.
So so you guys are going to disrupt the polyester industry. Now, let me just ask you a question, because you've got a lot of wisdom beyond just the polyester industry, just beyond chemicals. For the average consumer, we're being disrupted, or we're seeing industries disrupted that affect us, and we talked about those at the beginning of the show. So let me ask you a question. Which of these three companies do you think are the most disruptive for society? Facebook, Amazon, or Google?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that question, but I would say that the one that has the biggest impact right now on, and this is kind of interesting, on my industry, which is the oil and the chemicals industry, is Amazon. So Amazon there's been a fascinating trend, and oil guys could speak to this much more precisely than I can. But what's happened is that people, it used to be you always used more gasoline out of a refinery than you did diesel. And that's changed recently. So the demand for diesel has gone up, and it is almost exclusively because of Amazon. So if you think about it, you used to go to the store, you'd drive your car, you'd buy things, you'd go home. That's not the way it works anymore. Now you sit at home on your couch, you order something on Amazon, and a truck delivers it. The truck uses diesel, your car used to use gasoline. So these sorts of technologies do affect the real world, so to speak, or atoms, much more so than you might imagine. And it has a serious effect on my industry in terms of capital spending. So enormous dollars are going in to shift the balance of production of diesel versus gasoline in order to make sure that we can match the needs of transportation for goods and services.
Talking innovation, talking disruption. We're here with John Bissell, and I want you to remember this name, John Bissell. I'm going to make a prediction. I predict that you, John Bissell, will be the most influential entrepreneur in the Sacramento region over the next 100 years. I'm Mark Haney. When we come back, we're going to meet a guy who is disrupting the music business a little bit. He's building an online jazz piano business. We are going to meet Brandon Lowe. You're listening to Entrepreneurs Unlimited on KHTK, Sports 1140, streaming live, podcast, and YouTube at haneybiz.com. Welcome back. And we had a great show today. We've talked about some disruptors in the music industry and in the polyester industry, which is really not our normal. It's not what we normally think about in terms of building businesses. But let's talk about you for a minute. Let's talk about your career. Let's talk about what your career looks like for the next 12, 24, or 36 months. Does it look like a plateau? Or does it look like it's all downhill from here? Is there a career plateau in your future? And you got to think about that as entrepreneurs, guys. There's so many times when we are going through business and we're on fire. You could hear the way John Bissell was. You could hear the way Brendan Lowe are. These guys are driving their businesses right now. They are building things. But so many times in life, we hit these plateaus and we're just kind of going through the motions. So is it better? Okay, we talked about disruption today. And just on a personal level, is it better to disrupt or just kind of continue the status quo? I mean, if you're facing a plateau in your career, in your business, is it more risky to take a chance and go disrupt and make a major change, or is it more risky to just kind of putt along on that plateau and wait for others to pass us? And maybe we just retire with a gold watch at the end of the journey. There's always that gold watch, right? I mean, it used to be, we talk about paths for awesomeness, right? The path to the gold watch. The traditional path to awesomeness is really this gold watch, right? You're in your 20s, you learn, you go to college, get your first real career job. And then in your 30s, you make some adjustments and you settle into that real career job. In the 40s, you kick butt, you take names, maybe miss the kids' Little League games. And then in the 50s, you harvest, right? You cruise into retirement, start taking some vacation time, the good life. And in the 60s, you grab that gold watch, baby. It's that gold watch. And you sit back, you guide others, and you invest in a rocking chair, right? That's kind of the traditional path. But as we've talked about today, innovation and disruption is happening faster and faster. Now, 20-somethings are disrupting early and often. They're becoming millionaires before they're 30 years old. Some of these guys are billionaires, right? Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. He got rich quick, gentlemen.
And he doesn't use a gold watch. You'll never need a gold watch because he has a clock on his phone.
Exactly.
Technology. It's changed.
So now the 30-somethings, the 20-somethings are doing incredible stuff. The 30-somethings, shoot, they're serving on multiple boards. They're running venture capital companies and doing all kinds of stuff. And the 40-somethings, they're doing well. They're cranking and building things. They're straddling the new and the old. And the guys like me, the 50-somethings, we're sitting here going, holy cow, do I get out of the way? This technology is coming, or do I step up and I learn? And so I just want to take a minute to say, I am learning. I'm signing up for CrossFit because I'm going to be here for another 50 years. And, I got grandchildren and great-grandchildren, but I got so much to learn. So I want to thank these young guys, Clint, Marcus, my radio show team. Tom, you're not as young as some, but
not as young as anybody.
I think we have to, as 50-somethings, we've got to look to the millennial generation and say, hey, what can we take away? Because these guys are the guys that are changing technology, innovating, and disrupting. And I tell you what, I'm not going to sit in a rocking chair for the next 50 years in the harvest mode. I'm hoping that I can be relevant, that I can have a place at the table. And you know what? Maybe some of my old guy wisdom will rub off on some of you young guys a little bit. But more than that, I want to learn. I want to be a part of it. And together, we can build businesses. Take a little bit of us old guy wisdom, mix it with all the youth and the energy, and we could build some incredible things. And I think we can do some great things in terms of driving innovation right here in Sacramento. And you know what? What I've learned about 2016, there is no gold watch. The gold watch, we got to grab our own gold.
That's right.
The gold watch is over. We got to disrupt or we're going to get disrupted. Innovation, it's occurring too fast. So, I don't know where you're at with your plateau, but, have you ever seen a dog that loves to fetch? Right? You've seen that. You're out throwing the tennis ball, and there's a dog that he goes, and he goes, and he goes, and he won't quit. Right? You see those guys. That dog is motivated. That dog will not quit on you. It's like, man, your arm's getting tired. There's slobber all over the tennis ball, and you're still throwing it. You're like, come on, Pooch, Chunks. Come on, Chunks.
I knew that
Slow
was
it down. But you know what? That dog, that guy's got some energy, right? And if you don't have something like that you are passionate about, like what Brendan Lowe is passionate about with his piano school.
Innovative, very
right?
innovative.
If you don't have that, then maybe you do need to disrupt yourself and do something a little bit differently. And I'm not saying you need to go get a new job. I'm not saying you need to go get a new career or a new business. Maybe you need to think about your business differently. Maybe you need to think about yourself and how you approach your job differently. And I think together we can do that, okay? We have to rethink our priorities. And I think if we do this together, we will make some disruption. We will create some great things. So let's not lay around and wait. Let's get there. And ladies and gentlemen, you are not alone. Never above you. Never below you.
Always by your side.